I didn't find out through a letter or a phone call, not even a knock at the door. I found out on Facebook, a photo. My stepbrother, smiling in front of my father's truck, holding up the keys like a trophy. The caption read, "He gave me everything." I kept scrolling, hoping for a mistake, maybe a shared inheritance, a mention of my name, a will, a line, a word. There wasn't even a signature left for me. That's how I found out my father transferred every last thing he owned to someone else's son. Welcome back to Revenge with James, where silence isn't weakness, and betrayal never goes unanswered. If you've ever been erased, replaced, or quietly cut out of something you helped build, you're in the right place. Let me take you back to the day I realized my father didn't just forget me. He rewrote his legacy without me. And what I did with that truth, before all of this, before the signatures, the silence, the shifting of legacy, life was quiet. My days started early. Alarm at 6 a.m. Coffee strong. Work boots by the back door. I worked construction during the week, part-time auto repairs on Saturdays. Paid my dues, paid my rent, showed up for the people I love. Dad lived across town in a one-story ranch he bought after the second marriage. My stepbrother David lived there too. It was never officially my house, but I still cut the grass, fixed the gate when it sagged, drove Dad to appointments when David couldn't be bothered. There wasn't a lot of I love yous between us, but I showed mine, in oil changes, in hospital visits, in silence. On Sundays I'd bring over groceries, crack open a beer on the porch with Dad. He'd ask about my week in his way, nod, grunt, toss the bottle cap into the yard and say, "You're a good man." That was his version of affection. And I'd sit there finishing the beer I paid for, watching the way my father's eyes changed when David walked in. I didn't want anything from him. Not really. I just wanted to matter, to be seen, to be remembered. You don't always remember exact days, but you remember how people made you feel. My father wasn't a cruel man. He just played favorites. The kind of man who believed respect was earned. But affection, that was instinct. He had it for David, effortless, natural, like it was wired into him. With me he paused before every praise, like he had to decide if I'd earned it. David was the golden boy, same crooked grin as Dad. Loud, charming, reckless. He'd show up late and leave early, but somehow always left with the credit. I remember one Christmas, I gave Dad a photo frame with a picture of us fishing. David gave him a pair of cheap sunglasses. Dad held up the shades and said, "Now this is a gift." Then he set my frame on the floor, and when Dad remarried, I was too young to fight it and too old to forget it. My stepmother, Elaine, always kept her distance. She'd call me your boy when talking to Dad. Never our boy, just yours. I reached for the last piece of cornbread. She smiled and said, "You've had enough," just like that. No joke, no softness, just judgment hidden behind lipstick. Even at Dad's retirement party, I stood by the grill flipping burgers while David gave the toast. I was the son with grease on his hands, not the one with a mic in his. No drama, no stories, just showed up and left. That's the thing about being the steady one. People lean on you, but they don't listen to you. They remember your help, not your name. Even my father once said, "You're easy to forget. You never caused trouble." He laughed when he said it, but that laugh stayed with me. And when he passed, it wasn't the money that hurt. It was realizing how many people had already made peace with my absence. I never cared about the inheritance. Not really. I didn't count acres or bank account. What I wanted was his respect. To hear my father say, "You did good, son," without a comparison, without a sigh between the words. When he broke his hand at work, I drove him to therapy 3 days a week. Sat in the car, waited, drove him home. He never thanked me. But once he told a neighbor, "That's my boy. Always there when you need him." Bring in the emotional anchor of identity. His father's name, his legacy. I carried his name like a badge. Told people, "I'm John's son." It meant something. He was a man of work boots and grit. He built things with his hands. Lost hearing in one ear from factory noise. Never missed a shift. He wasn't rich, but he was respected. And I wanted to be the son that proved his kind of man still mattered. I didn't know I'd be the only one without something to carry home. I remember one afternoon at Dad's. I had stopped by to drop off some groceries like I always did. David was there, sitting on the porch, feet kicked up, flipping through Dad's mail like it was his own. He smiled too wide and said, "Yeah, just handling some stuff for the old man. You know how it is." Dad mentioned once he'd cut back on a few accounts. Said David was helping consolidate things. I offered to look it over. He waved me off. Said David had it handled. I started noticing things. Dad would forget I had called. Tell me he hadn't seen me in weeks, even when I was just there. And David, he was always around now like a shadow. He said thanks, set it on the table, and the next week it was gone, replaced with a picture of him and David at a golf course I wasn't invited to. A moment that hits harder than expected. The next time I dropped by, the spare key under the mat was gone. I knocked. David answered. He looked me up and down and said, "Next time call first." There was no next time. It's strange what your mind holds on to, especially when the people around you start to feel like strangers. Moments where it felt like maybe, just maybe, I was truly seen. I remember the winter Dad slipped on the driveway, tore his rotator cuff. He wouldn't ask for help, but I showed up every morning anyway. Shoveled snow, made his coffee, helped him dress when he wouldn't admit he couldn't lift his arm. One morning, he sat at the kitchen table, grumbling at the toaster like it had betrayed him. I fixed it. He didn't say thank you, but he did pat the table and said, "You always come through." That one line got me through that whole winter. Another time, I must have been 16. David wrecked Dad's truck, said it was black ice, but I knew it wasn't. I saw the empty beer can in the passenger seat. Dad was furious. Told me you need to set a better example. I didn't even have my license yet. Still, I took the fall, told Dad I had been with David, that it was partly my fault, grounded myself, basically. David promised to come clean eventually. He never did, and I never reminded him. There were still good moments though. Barbecues in the backyard, fixing up the fence with Dad in the summer heat, his old blues records playing from the garage. He once looked at me and said, "You're the kind of man I wish I'd been at your age." I held on to that line for years. I kept it like currency, spent it every time I felt invisible. Returned to present, but when the phone stopped ringing, when the front door stayed closed, I started realizing something. All that love I gave, all those years, they had no receipt, no record, just memory. I didn't expect a letter, but I thought maybe there'd be something, a voicemail, a line in the will, even just a sentence in the obituary that mentioned both of us. It showed up on my feed one morning while I was sipping cold coffee. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't mentioned, but the moment I saw it, my stomach tightened like it already knew. He was holding keys, wearing Dad's favorite leather jacket, and smiling like he'd won something. The caption, "He gave me everything." I looked for clues. Maybe it was symbolic. Maybe David meant it emotionally. But no, that truck behind him, it was Dad's. Still had the fishing sticker we put on it after that trip to Lake George. The one I paid for. I picked up my phone, called the lawyer's office, asked one question. Was there a will? She sighed, said she'd get back to me. 20 minutes later, the email came. There was no will, because everything had already been transferred. Months before Dad died. Quietly, cleanly, legally. My name wasn't on a single page. That was the moment. Not a slap, not a scream, just erasure, signed and dated, like I'd never been part of the story to begin with. I didn't drive home after that call, didn't turn off the engine either. I just sat in my truck, key still in the ignition, phone in my lap, watching the heat fog up the windshield, wondering how the hell we got here. Fixes the roof, fills the fridge, takes the high road, and then one day, he finds out none of it was written down. None of it counted. You think you'll be angry, you imagine yelling, slamming doors, maybe punching a wall, but that's not what it feels like. It feels like gravity shifts, like the world gets quiet in a cruel way, like something you were leaning on, without knowing, just isn't there anymore. I replayed every moment. Every time I said, "It's okay, I'll handle it." Every birthday I spent alone because I didn't want to make a fuss. Every time I held my tongue when David took credit. And in that moment, sitting in that truck, staring at my own reflection in the glass, I stopped being the son who served, and became the man who remembers. There's a difference between being present and being the one who holds everything up. I didn't just show up for birthdays. I bailed David out more than once. First time was a payday loan. He was 24, said it was for rent, but I found out later it was for a trip to Vegas. I wired him the money anyway. $1,300 I didn't really have. Told him not to tell Dad. Second time he crashed Dad's truck, hit a pole in the parking lot behind the bar, said it was black ice. I told Dad it was my fault. I paid for the repairs with a credit card I'm still chipping away. And when David started that landscaping business that failed in 6 months, I helped him build the damn website, passed out flyers, talked to people at church, all while he stayed home and played video games. David let him believe he was just lucky, gifted, destined. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one, the one who didn't need help, so didn't get praise, just more responsibility, more silence. I didn't want credit, I just wanted to matter. Slow, pointed line, and now I realize, The only thing I ever did wrong was think that loyalty guaranteed love. I thought the Facebook post was the worst of it. Thought maybe David just got there first, claimed what wasn't his out of impulse. But what I saw next, that's what broke something in me. I got the paperwork from the lawyer. A PDF, clean, legal, final. The transfer had been signed 6 months before Dad died. Every asset, the house, the land, the truck, retirement account, even his tools, the ones he said I'd inherit someday because you're the one who knows how to use them. But here's the thing. I looked at the date, the signature line. Dad was in the hospital that day. I was there. He was hooked up to an IV, barely awake, slurring his words. The nurse had to lift his spoon. Steady hand. I called the hospital, asked for patient records. Time-stamped, charted. They confirmed it. He was sedated, under observation. No visitors were supposed to have access to him unsupervised that day. Said she didn't remember that signing. Said her logbook had a gap, a blank. Now the moment of full clarity. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just inheritance. This was a setup. David didn't wait for Dad to die. He erased me while the man was still breathing. I sat there, holding that document in my hands, and something inside me stopped bending. It didn't snap. It didn't shatter. It just stopped. Stopped explaining. Stopped hoping. Stopped letting people rewrite the truth I lived. I didn't confront David. Not then. Not with yelling. Not with fists. I sat with it. That signature. That date. That smirk on David's face in that photo. I didn't sleep much that week. But I didn't waste the time either. Asked him what a notarized signature should look like. What timelines have to be followed. What documents have to be filed. And when. I reviewed my father's medical records. Not because I doubted them, but because I knew David never expected me to look. I visited the bank, quietly. Asked if there were power of attorney forms filed. Confirmed the dates, the signatures, the transfer. Every answer was another thread. And when you pull enough threads, things unravel. Let the audience feel the difference between chaos and control. I didn't text David, didn't call, didn't even let him know I'd seen the documents. I wanted him to believe he'd gotten away with it. Because people like him only slip when they think they're standing on solid ground. Sometimes the most powerful move is the one they don't see coming until it's done. I started small, pulled my name off the family utility accounts, the ones I'd still been paying, even after the transfer, water, gas, internet, all under my father's name, but billed to me. I stopped, but cold showers and unpaid notices don't stay quiet forever. Then I called the DMV, asked about the truck title, had them send me a copy. Turns out Dad had listed me as backup beneficiary a year before. That form never got updated. David hadn't seen that page. So I transferred the truck quietly, legally, back to myself. Didn't drive it. Just towed it to a friend's garage. Let it sit behind closed doors. Bet it sit behind closed doors. I started recording every conversation, quiet apps, automatic backups, just in case he got bold. One day, I called and asked about the bank accounts. Told him I was just curious. He laughed, said, "Don't worry, big bro. I got it all sorted." He had no idea I was forwarding everything to someone else. I didn't slam doors. I didn't raise my voice. I moved like water, silent. I let him stay comfortable. Because men like David only look in mirrors. They never check their blind spots. Then by the time he realized something was off, the foundation had already shifted beneath his feet. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Revenge has a silence to it, a cold kind. It doesn't come with cheering. There's no standing ovation when you outmaneuver someone who never thought you could. I remember sitting alone in that truck. Again, same parking lot as before. Hands on the wheel. Truck off. Just thinking. Maybe I should have walked away. Maybe I should have let them have it all. What good is being right if it costs you your peace? Because to your peace. I thought about Dad, not the version David paraded around in those tribute speeches. The real one. The man who couldn't say I love you out loud but once drove across town just to bring me jumper cable. The one who never hugged me, but tightened my lug nuts every time I left the driveway. Then I asked myself, would he be proud of what I'm doing? Would he understand why I couldn't let it go? Or would he just see another son clawing for a name already buried? The truth is, I don't know. All I knew was that I couldn't let the story end the way they wrote it. Not with me missing from the page. I didn't need revenge to feel whole. I just needed to exist in the story, to have it known that I was here, and I mattered. David's mistake wasn't greed. It wasn't forgery. It wasn't even locking me out of my own father's life. His mistake was the celebration. There were banners, projectors, a framed photo of Dad with a quote he never said. David wore a tailored suit and a smug smile. Told the crowd he was honoring the man who trusted him with everything. Watched him raise his glass, thanking guests for believing in the vision. He couldn't help himself. He didn't just take the name, he wanted credit for building it. Later that night, outside by the loading dock, I heard him talking to one of his buddies. Didn't know I was standing around the corner. He laughed and said, "Honestly, I don't even think the old man knew what he signed. He was doped up on pain meds. But hey, signature's a signature, right? Like erasing me was just part of the hustle. I didn't record it. I didn't need to, because I had something better." That was the moment he lost the room. Not because I exposed him, but because he exposed himself. David was still glowing, like he hadn't just told on himself an hour ago. Still thinking he was untouchable. Inside was everything he thought I'd never gather. Notarized hospital records, sworn statements, financial transfer logs, the DMV record, showing the truck was never fully his, and a formal letter from my attorney. Stated that assets were obtained under false pretenses, that we were reopening the estate, that any public use of my father's name, moving forward without approval, would be legally challenged. And tucked inside, just for good measure, was a notarized copy of the final bank account transfer my father had made to me, quietly, months before the papers David forged. David forged, he never saw it, because people like David think stealing the spotlight means owning the stage. Within 48 hours, the house title was frozen, the foundation pulled its name from David's event, the truck disappeared from his driveway. So did the confidence in his voice. And when he tried to file a complaint, he realized the account he was dipping into wasn't just drained, it was redirected. I didn't take it all, just what was mine. The rest, I let him keep because it'll never feel clean again. I didn't expect fireworks. Didn't expect him to apologize, or explain, or even speak. And he did. When he finished reading that letter, his hand dropped to his side, the paper stayed folded, and he just stood there, mouth open, like the words hadn't settled yet. People started looking, not at me, at him, at his face, at the way the smile slipped and never came back. Elaine, my stepmother, walked over to ask what was wrong. He whispered something to her, and I watched her eyes scan the room, like she just realized the foundation beneath her heels was cracking. But the way he crumpled the envelope in his hand, that was louder than any scream. I didn't stay long after that, didn't toast, didn't linger, just walked out, jacket over my shoulder, keys in hand. And as I passed the ballroom doors, I looked back one last time. That's the part no one talks about. The moment they realized they didn't just lose the game, they lost control of the story. Not the same son who sat in his truck, holding his phone, hoping for an explanation that never came. That man still believed fairness would find him, in the kind of justice that doesn't need to scream, because it stands on its own. Soft, slow honesty, the kind that lingers. I don't need to be in the spotlight, I just needed to be in the story. And now, I am. But I'm not invisible anymore. Not to myself. That's what changed. Have you ever been left out of something you helped build, silently cut out of the story, like you were never part of it? Tell me below, or just write, "I'm in the story now." And if you've ever been betrayed quietly, and came back stronger, not louder, then please subscribe. This voice, it's for you. There was a jacket. Dad's favorite, faded brown leather, the collar cracked. One cuff stitched where I fixed it after he tore it on the gate. He used to wear it to every important moment. My graduation, his retirement party, the night we buried my mother. Said it made him feel like himself. Said it held years. But I did ask David for the jacket. He laughed. Said I need it more than you do now. And I stood there in the back of that ballroom, watching him wear something he didn't understand. And when David handed it back weeks later, folded, quiet, not meeting my eyes, that was the only apology I ever got. He had everything, but he gave the jacket back. Because deep down, even he knew. Didn't explain. I just put the jacket away, back in the cedar chest where Dad used to keep it. David hasn't spoken to me since, but I see the fundraiser's been canceled. The foundation's gone quiet. His name doesn't carry the weight it used to. Sometimes justice doesn't need a headline. Sometimes it just needs to last. If you've ever had to fight quietly, this story was for you. To gather proof in silence. To move without warning. To take back the story they tried to erase me from. But here's the truth. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I didn't destroy. I didn't humiliate. I corrected. Or is strength choosing not to disappear, even when they want you to? I was just watching. And while they laughed and counted what they stole, I counted every lie. They thought they won, but they never looked behind them until they handed me the rope. You never heard his side. You never needed to. Because this was never about him. Everything you heard, every page of this story, came from me. My eyes, my hands, my silence, my name. And now that you've heard it, it's mine forever. I didn't say a word when I left the gala. Didn't send another letter. Didn't make another move. The family trust had been legally reopened, and the nameplate outside the house, the one that used to read the Maxwell legacy, was gone. He stopped posting, stopped smiling. The foundation website redirected to mine. The sponsors pulled out, slowly, quietly, like they'd never been there at all. And the jacket, it arrived in the mail, no note, folded, clean, boxed like a return. Funny what 5 months can do when you move without noise. Let me ask you something. If the house you helped build, brick by brick, favor by favor, was suddenly no longer yours, just tell me this. Have you ever been erased, but chose not to vanish? Write it below, or just say I'm still here. That's enough. And if you're watching this alone tonight, this voice, it's for you.